Card King, here I come. Hello, music fans, music collectors, and all hobbyists. Welcome to the Card King Sports and Variety Show. I am your host, the Catman, Brian Cataquet, a.k.a. the Card King. We are live on ABC's KMET 1490am.com, your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast. I thank everyone for tuning in this morning. On the telephone line, I welcome to the program a standout bass player whose work can be seen with the legendary Vanilla Fudge, Vince Martell's We Remember Jimmy, Carnaby Street, and others. I welcome in the notable Pete Bremy. Pete, great to have you.
Great to be here, Brian. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And Pete, your website for all listening is petebremy.com. And there I found some fascinating material on your early years. 14 years old is when you first found the bass. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yes. Yeah,
now,
I was 14. I was a drummer first, and wanted to make music, and I wanted to play guitar. But all my friends were guitarists, so they talked me into playing bass.
Now, what drew you to the bass?
Well, as I said, my friends. I wanted to play guitar, but all my other friends that had already had guitars, and they said, we have enough guitarists now, but we need a bass player, so why don't you play bass? And my best friend, Jeff, who I'm still best friends with, said, well, I said, what's a bass? I didn't even know what it was. And he says, well, it's just like a guitar, but it's only got 4 strings instead of 6, and you only have to play one note at a time. So I said, okay, that's for me. And that's how I got started, actually.
And that's how you got started. And, I had Vinny Martell of Vanilla Fudge on the program. I found him to be such a very humble guy. If you could take us back how you were first introduced to this iconic musician and the rest of the Vanilla Fudge band.
Okay, well, I first saw them when I was 14, actually. That was actually the first concert I went to. It was happened to be very close. And I actually saw them they hadn't made it yet, so it was a very small venue that I saw them at. The concert was actually in August of 1967 on the day before their first album was released. So again, they hadn't made it yet. But I didn't meet them that night. That was in 67, and I didn't meet them until exactly 30 years later. I went to many of their concerts because they became my favorite band from that moment in 67. And in 1997, I got involved with a fan website for Vanilla Fudge. And the band wasn't even together at that time, but I became an assistant webmaster of this fan site for the Fudge. And that was right at in 1997, that was right at the beginning of the Internet. And one by one, the original members of the band came online and discovered that site, and the webmaster at the time put them all together, and they declared it their official site. So through the website, I learned that Vinny lived not very far from me, so I got to meet him, and that's even kind of a funny story how I met him finally. But long story short, I met him, and we jammed together one time, and he liked the way I played, so he was putting together a new project in 1998 or it was 2000 actually. We had become friends, but he put together a new band for himself in 2000, and he asked me to play bass for him, and I've been playing bass for him ever since for 25 years.
I mean, that's incredible, Pete, because, just reading your background, I mean, you were a Vanilla Fudge fan, right?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, they were the first concert. The first concert I ever saw, and they just blew me away completely. Tim Bogert on bass just, was amazing, and Carmine on drums, because I was a drummer also. Carmine was amazing, and I was also introduced to the Hammond B3 organ. Mark Stein was incredible. The vocals of the band, it was just this kid that became starstruck, because I was just a kid. I was 14, and they replaced the Beatles as my favorite band at that moment. So I've been a fan all these years, and I didn't meet them until 30 years later.
That's amazing. Now, many people may not realize, but you were a music major, right? Music theory.
Yes, I started music. Fortunately and unusually, my high school actually had music theory classes, and I started that in high school. And I was already playing in bands in high school, and by the time I got into college, I was playing professionally out in clubs and stuff. And so to please my parents, I actually started in college as a business major. So they said, "Oh, you need something to fall back on," but I just couldn't deal with that. So I very quickly, after one semester, switched to a music major. And but I didn't graduate because I couldn't keep up with both. I was already doing what I wanted to do, but I was playing 5-6 nights a week, getting home 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, and having to get up at 6 and 7 for classes every day. So unfortunately it didn't last. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot in a brief amount of time, and then studied on my own too. So yeah, I have been trained in theory as well.
And we're talking with Pete Bremy of Vanilla Fudge. Pete, Tim Bogert, original bass player of Fudge, a person, like I said, you admired early on, as you mentioned. Now, does this still, after so many years, wow you that you have that spot? I mean, that's big shoes to fill, no?
Yeah, I still, they pinch me all the time when I'm playing with them. It is just amazing, after having seen them on stage. And, people ask me, what does it feel like to be on stage with them? And quite honestly, when I'm on stage with them, I feel right at home. When it really gets me, after sound check in a theater, and I usually take a walk to the back of the theater, and I look down there, and I see Mark's Hammond organ, I see Carmine's drums, and then I see my bass sitting there on the stage. When I view it from an audience perspective, that's when it really hits me. Like, wow, that's going to be me up there with those guys, But when I'm on stage, they make me feel right at home, and they always have, So that's when it blows me away, looking at the stage right before the show, seeing all the gear up there waiting for us.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume you're probably saying to yourself, wow, this is, I finally made it to the big leagues.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Tim Bogert was a friend of mine. May he rest in peace. I did a website for him when we create. That's how I actually met Timmy. Before I met them, I actually met them finally when they all got back together to do a show in Japan. Vinny invited me to the rehearsal to meet Carmine and Timmy. Mark wasn't doing that show. I didn't meet Mark till a couple of years later. But that's when I met Carmine and Timmy in person. But I had actually done a tribute website to Tim Bogert, which is actually still up there, and it's really pretty bad by today's standards. I didn't keep up with the website technology, so that website's 25-year-old, 30-year-old technology. But he always stuck with me. He always stuck with me on it. And he discovered that site, and he called me up, and we became friends over the phone until I finally got to meet him. But we stayed friends, and while he was still in the band, I was his bass tech for a few shows. I was actually tour manager for the band, too, a couple of times for a few months while they were on tour.
And, something that I just thought of, when you listen to Tim Bogert's style of play, I find it to be very melodic. Now, when you're playing those Fudge tunes, do you feel a need to play your own style, or do you attempt to keep it sounding as best as you can, as Bogert played it? What do you think differentiates your style of play versus Bogert's?
Actually, a little bit of both. There are certain, because Vanilla Fudge music is very symphonic. So there are some scripted parts. So there are certain lines in some songs that I really have to play exactly what Timmy played. But there are other parts where I have freedom to do my own, because that's what Timmy did. He never played, I saw them live so many times, and he never played the songs exactly the same way twice. Anyway, the albums are a snapshot in time. If they did 3 takes, and the second take was the best take, the first take and the third take were different than the second take. So that's what we're used to hearing, all these years. And seeing Timmy play, again, he never played the song exactly the same way twice. So I feel like I have that little bit of freedom to be myself as well, as long as I stick to the parts that, that sync with the different instruments. They have to stay the same. And Timmy kept them the same as well. So there you go.
Right. And then, Vanilla Fudge, they had a lot of breakup. Well, they had to break up and then they had a lot of reunions, right? So now, wasn't there a time, I believe it was the late 90s, where, well, actually, I think it was 2002, if I'm not mistaken, where you subbed for Bogert. It was yourself, Pete Bremy, and T.M. Stevens. Was that the year 2002?
Yes, it was. T.M. Stevens, I was working a day job at that time because I had raised a family and I had to finally get a day job because I was playing, music locally most of the time back then. And so when I had a day job and I was using my vacation time to sub for Tim Bogert, and I actually ran out of vacation time, and that's when T.M. Stevens took over for me. For a while. They got TM.
They got TM. Now, you were working a day job? Now, were you a general manager at a company?
Yeah, I was general manager of a company for a while, a printing company. I had about 60-plus employees working underneath me at that time, so wow. I had to get back. When the vacation time was up, I had to get back. So shortly after that, I left, and I actually got a real estate license, so I had more flexibility to go. I said I never wanted to have that happen again, where I have to leave a tour, for a day job. So I got a real estate license and sold real estate. And so did my wife. So she could cover for me if I went back out on the road.
That's amazing. So how did you jiggle the both? I mean, you had a high position job and then you had to travel. That must have been a lot of wear and tear in your body.
Yeah, actually, some of the shows at that time, they traveled on the road, but they would fly me back. They would fly me back to go back to work, and then because most of the shows were on the weekends, so I was able to tour with them for quite a while, and they would fly me in and out. I would go back and forth from home to the next show, from home to the next shows on the weekends, and if there were shows during the week, I did use up some of my vacation time, and finally I ran out. But it was a little bit tough. But hey, I was living the dream, man. So it wasn't too tough to take.
Of course. And what about Cactus? Now you were part of Cactus as well, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I subbed for Tim Bogert again. That's how I got started. I subbed for Timmy, and Werner Fritchings was the guitarist of Cactus at that time. And then, of course, I knew Carmine, and Carmine knew I knew all when the Fudge broke up, I became a huge Cactus fan as well. I followed all the guys throughout their careers, and and the other projects they did too. So I subbed for Timmy a couple times in Cactus, and then Timmy finally left. He retired from Cactus, and then Elliot Rubinson was a friend of Carmine's. He's the CEO of Dean Guitar and D Drums, and he played with Cactus for a while. But then they got some gigs, and Elliot had signed on to do a tour with Michael Schenker. So Carmine asked me to come in and do a couple of shows with them. By that time, Jim McCarty, the original guitarist of Cactus, had come back, and McCarty actually said he really loved the way I played, so they kept me on after that. So I was with Cactus for about 5 years, and we recorded 2 albums. I'm on the Black Dawn's album, and we did a live album in Tokyo. And then I think in 2016, Jim retired from touring, and then it was a little bit rough on me doing the Fudge and Cactus, so I left Cactus when Jim McCarty left.
Right. Now I read something that you are the only non-original member to play in both of those bands.
Yeah, somebody pointed that out to me, actually, and I said, yeah, I guess so. I played in both those bands. Cactus has had other bass players, and so has the Fudge, but I'm the only one that played in both.
Right, that's what I read. I read an article about that. So that's a rare standing for you. Something very neat on your resume. So
Mm-hmm.
now, what about Vinnie Martell? He's got a band. Was it the Jimi Hendrix? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. Vinny has always been a big Hendrix fan. Vinny, of course, the Fudge toured with Hendrix back in the day. They did a bunch of shows together, and Vinny and Jimmy actually became friends, and they used to jam together. And so in Vinny's solo project, we played a lot of Hendrix material, and nobody plays Hendrix like Vinny does. He's amazing. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hendrix song, Are You Experienced? It's got a backwards guitar solo in it. Well, Vinny actually can play the backwards solo forwards and make it sound like it's backwards. It's like when I first heard Vinny do that, I freaked out. I said that was amazing. So we put this together. We brought on T.C. Tolliver. It's a trio. We brought in T.C. Tolliver of Wendy O and the Plasmatics. Great drummer, great guy, and an amazing drummer. And TC and I have really hit it off as a rhythm section. So, I suggested to Vinny, I said, you play Hendrix so well, we should be doing a Hendrix tribute. Tribute bands are like everything these days. There's millions of tribute bands, there's not a lot of Hendrix tributes. There are some, but, and Vinny plays it so well. So we put this together and we started touring. And if I may, I'm sure since you're streaming, hopefully, if I may put in a plug, we have some shows coming up in July. Can I give them a plug? Is that okay?
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. July 17th, we'll be at Fanatics in Lima, New York. Then on July 19th, we'll be at the famous Cutting Room in New York City. And then on July the 20th, we'll be at Daryl's house in Pauling, New York. Daryl's house is owned by rock and roller Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates. That's his private club. Or it's not private, it's public, but it's his. He owns that club. So those 3 shows will be in July. And this band really kicks butt. It really does. Vinny does it so well. And
Vinny, he's really good live.
Oh, yeah, Vinny's amazing. He's an amazing guitar player. He's probably one of the most unsung guitar players I've ever seen. He deserves a lot more credit than he gets, that's for sure. He's an amazing guitar player.
Yeah, so you said you had a funny, you had a story of how you met Vinny. Give us a brief introduction of how you met Vinny.
Oh, yeah, okay. This was, again, back in the late 90s. We talked on the phone before we met, and I said, I would love to come. I would love to meet you in person. Come and see you play. If you ever you ever play locally. He says, yeah, occasionally. Long story short, he left a message on my phone that he was doing an actual solo gig at a coffee house owned by a close friend of his. He was doing it as a favor. So I went to go see him. I mean, I'm a starstruck guy, so I walked in the place and I saw him. I said, oh, my gosh, that's Vince Martell over there. He was sitting there playing an acoustic guitar. And so I said, I can't be a jerk when I meet him. I gotta be cool. So Vinny had written a song called Thoughts that was featured on the Vanilla Fudge's 3rd album, the Renaissance album. So I got myself a cup of coffee. I sat in the back. Vinny was playing, and I didn't introduce myself to him. So I waited a while. When he in between songs, I walked up to him and I said, I said to him, hey, you're really good. I said, do you take any requests? And he kind of made a face and said, well, I don't know, like that. And I just said, well, I said, well, that's okay. The song I was going to request, you probably wouldn't know it anyway. And he goes, well, maybe I might. What is it? I said, nah, forget it. You'd never know it. It's this song called Thoughts by Vanilla Fudge. He broke out laughing. He goes, you're Pete, aren't you? And I said, yeah. So we laughed, and he took a break, and we had coffee together. We hit it off. We exchanged phone numbers and became friends after. That's how we became friends, actually.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, when I look at your website, how about Carnaby Street? Now, this is a band that features the music of the British invasion, right?
Yep, that's also a true. We have a Carnaby Street duo and trio. My buddy Chris Roselle, a great singer. He's got an amazing voice. And on guitar, and myself on bass, and another great drummer, Bill Dino DiMartino on drums when we added drums in. He's got a great Ringo feel. I love working with him. He's just got that feel. He's just like, you feel like you're working with Ringo sometimes. And so we do a lot of Beatles, but we do a lot of British. Kinks, Stones, Dave Clark 5, Bee Gees, Bad Singer, all British and some American stuff too. We do some Simon and Garfunkel. So Chris and I have some great harmonies together, I think, and we're very popular here in the Northeast, New York tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. We just travel around here. But it's a great band.
I wanted to ask you, Pete, prior to that big break you got in 97, meeting Vinnie Martell. Now, you spent most of your career as a local New Jersey musician. It's so difficult, a lot of competition to make it, huh? It's still difficult?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because there's fewer and fewer bands like on the local scene around. If you look at the local scene around here, all the musicians have gray hair. And I don't think anybody wants to be in a band anymore. I see very few young bands around when I go out. There's some, but most of the bands and musicians have gray hair. It's all for younger people. I think it's all streaming and DJs and even my own two sons had DJs at their weddings. They're pops and musicians, and they had DJs at their weddings. So, that goes back a few years, but it's tough. I was just in the right myself. I was just in the right place at the right time. The first time I played with the Fudge, Tim Bogert got sick the day before they went on tour, and Vinny knew that I knew all their music. And the day before, I auditioned for them at 10 o'clock at night, the night before we left for the tour, and the guys, they auditioned me, and they came to my house to audition. I have a little studio here in my house. I happen to have a Hammond B3 and a set of drums because I was a drummer. I kept my drums. So they came to my house, and they went into a little powwow on the side of my basement where my studio is. And then I still remember Carmine coming over to me after they talked, and he said, I think this is going to work. And I was off with them the next day. That's how I got started subbing for them. And then when Timmy finally retired, they liked the way I played, so they brought me on full time.
To have a drummer like Carmine Appice, many people say he's one of the top 10 drummers of all time. That must be, something to work with, huh? Powerful drummer.
Oh yeah. I love working with Carmine. He's actually very easy to work with if you know him. Of course, I studied his drumming. Again, I played drums to their records when I was a kid, so I know Carmine's style pretty well. So it was fairly easy for me to work with him, just because I knew his style so well.
Now, during your travels with Vanilla Fudge, you must have met so many artists. Anyone stands out in your mind that was a big thrill for you?
Oh yeah, there are a few. Like I said, I'm a starstruck kid. There are quite a few. One that stands out is Rick Derringer. May he rest in peace. Who just recently passed away about a week ago. We toured with him at Hippie Fest, and I got to play with him, and we hung out a bit on the tour. We went out to dinner a couple times together, and he was a great guy. I got to meet Keith Emerson of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and then Carl Palmer. I've met both Keith Emerson and Carl Palmer at separate times. I never got to see ELP as a band though, but I was actually with Mark Stein when he met Keith Emerson, and it turns out they were big fans of each other as well, and they didn't know it. And I was there when they actually met. Another great group, guys, is the Rascals, Gene Cornish, Eddie Brigatti, Felix Cavalier, and I've become friends with Gene Cornish. And it turns out that my wife, Beverly, is actually related to Eddie, distantly, but related. But
Really?
I've gotten to, yeah, we've had a lot of great musicians sit in with the Fudge as well. We've had Joe Bonamassa sit in with us. Robbie Krieger of The Doors has sat in with us. Frankie Benally, may he rest in peace, great drummer for Quiet Riot. He sat in with us, and just to name I could go on. There's been so many, but I've got to play with a bunch of great drummers. You know, as a bass player, I did a session with Mark Stein, Liberty DeVito, Billy Joel, drummer, great drummer for 30 years. Albert Bouchard, original drummer of Blue Oyster Cult, and David Yusikinen of the Hooters. I've done sessions with him, all stemming from playing with the Fudge. It's been a relatively short professional career, but it's been a lot of fun, and thank God it's still going. You told me when I was 14 years old I'd be doing this in my 70s. I'd have said you're nuts, but here we are, still going.
I mean, there you have it. I mean, you definitely left a mark, Pete. Great job today. So your next tour, we have about a minute left. Anything else you want to add before we say goodbye?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I would. I gave you the We Remember Jimmy dates for the people up here in the Northeast, and look for that. And the Fudges will be back out on tour in a few weeks, the end of June. On June the 25th, we'll be at Bergen Pack in Englewood, New Jersey. June 26th, we'll be at the Bolton Theater in Bay Shore, New York. Then we head out to Illinois. On the 28th, we'll be at the Wildey Theater in Edwardsville, Illinois. And on the 29th, at the Arcada Theater in St. Charles, Illinois. Hope to see our people and at these shows that are in those areas.
Great job, Pete. Thanks for coming on.
Brian, it's been a pleasure. I've had a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Pete Bremy, Vanilla Fudge. Until next week, happy collecting to all.